Rabbi.
Good morning. All right, bonus. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Shabbos Daf Kuv Beis. We're going to be going over today from Perek HaZoyrek to Perek HaBoina. We're going to be learning some really deep concepts, especially on Amud Aleph. Firstly, the Mishnah is going to establish the rule that in order for an act to have a shgaga status, the person has to be in a state of shoygeg from the beginning all the way till the end. And if in middle of the melacha, the person is no longer a shoygeg, could be the person is a mazid, which is worse, it won't be defined as an act of Shabbos that was done by shoygeg, and therefore there will not be a chiyuv to bring a korban chatas. B'chlal, to have in our minds that when a person goes against the will of Hashem temporarily, you know, there's doing it on purpose, there's doing it on accident, the greater the purpose, the greater the awareness, the greater the sin, which is true, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be chayv a korban. Sometimes it doesn't mean you're going to be chayv any human punishment. There are many things for which Hashem brings about the atonement. Only when we violated, when we did that sin in a certain window, only then are we mechoyev to bring the atonements ourselves, is based in mechoyev to bring the atonement. And indeed, again, we're going to learn about this need of the person's state of shoygeg. That has to be from the beginning until the end. This is particularly easy to apply when it comes to the malacha of hoitzah, because as we keep on learning, hoitzah really is a two-step malacha. There is the akira and there is the hanacha. It's possible that between the akira and the hanacha, the person becomes aware either that today is Shabbos or that this act is actually prohibited, and this will actually affect the chiyuv of chatos. Now, speaking about hoitzah, and we'll speak about it a bit now in the Hagdama, and then we'll mention it as we learn the Gemara. Listen, my friends, what time are we looking at to define as the time of the sin? Like, for example, we all light, it's a mitzvah midrabanan to light Shabbos candles. The fire that we are lighting is continuously burning into Shabbos. How am I allowed to light Shabbos candles? Right, that's the question of the Nemuka Yosef. By the way, he asks this question not here in Shabbos, but on Bava Kama, when we learned the sugya of Eishoi, Mishum Chitzoi, which means that one of the avos of Nezikin is if I light a fire and my fire burns down your house, I'm chayiv to pay. Why am I chayiv to pay? I didn't directly destroy your house. So one opinion is it's like shooting an arrow. When I shoot an arrow, okay, the arrow doesn't penetrate the victim the second I let go of the bow. But since my koyach is in the arrow and that is what did the damage, or God forbid, killed someone, I'm chayiv. So the same thing affecting a Mukha Yosef. If that's the case, then when a person lights a candle, a woman likes the Shabbos candles, it's burning into Shabbos, it's considered her action. So is she burning a fire on Shabbos? So it says in the Mukha Yosef, no, of course not. Taka, she's the one that lit it. It's her koyach. It's her fire. However, when did she light it? She lit it out of Shabbos. So the continuous burning of Shabbos is attributed to the time of the lighting. When she lit the candles, then it wasn't Shabbos yet. So that's the Nemuka Yosef. The Gemara we're going to learn today might appear to go against that, because based on that, if I do an act of throwing, when did I throw it? When I threw it, when the Akira happened. If I was in a state of shoygeg when the Akira happened, we will learn today that's not enough to define this malacha as a shoygeg. I have to still be in the state of a shoygeg when the hanacha happened. Question is why? If the ikid is the time of my input is when I threw it. If at that time I was a shoygeg, who cares if I was a b'shoygeg or b'mezid during the hanacha? Adrabah, we look at the time of my action. So kum tacha is that there are two things we have to figure out. It's a deep concept to split this here. If you want to analyze the time of the violation, it's the time of my action. The time of my action by hoitzah, when it comes to zirika, is when I did the akira, because when I do zirika, I'm no longer touching anything. until the end of the malacha happens, which is the hanacha. But the definition of what happened if during the hanacha I was then no longer in a state of a shoygeg, then there wasn't a hanacha b'shoygeg. And we're going to chew this over with greater detail when we learn the Gemara inside. We're going to review the machloikas between the Chachamim and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel regarding yesh yediyah lachatzi shiur or ein yediyah lachatzi shiur. For example, ksiva. Ksiva is comprised of me writing 2 letters. I was a shoygeg. I wrote a letter. And now I become aware, oh, today is Shabbos. And then I forget again, and I write the second letter. Both letters were written in a state of shoygeg, but in between each letter, I became aware. Now, normally, if a person did an entire malacha b'shoygeg, then they become aware, then they repeat that malacha again, they're going to be chayv 2 chatois, right? Yediyahs are machalkos. Here, the yediyah was in middle of a malacha. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel holds ein yediyah lachatzi shiur. Since the awareness after writing 1 letter does not bring about the chiyuv of achatos, it has no significance. If it has no significance, listen to this. So then when he wrote the second letter b'shoygeg, he now has 2 letters written b'shoygeg, he will be chayav chatos. The Chachamim hold no. If he wrote a letter b'shoygeg and he has awareness that it's Shabbos, or awareness that you can't write a letter, even though that awareness doesn't bring about the chiyuv chatos, but it separates the writing of the first letter and the writing of the second letter, and when he writes the second letter b'shoygeg, this person will not be chayav chatos. So there's a machlokes whether again yesh yediyah or ein yediyah lachatzi shiur. We're going to learn in Daf Kuf Beis that all of the Tanaim agree that whenever I do a malacha, like for example throwing, not carrying, throwing, akira and hanacha, but the moment I let go of the item, the moment I threw the item, there's nothing I can do to bring it back. It's out of my control. In such a case, everyone is going to be moida that a yediyah in between the akira and the hanacha will not separate them. And therefore, when the item falls, as long as that, when the hanacha happened, I was in a state of shoygeg, you will have a malacha that was done b'shoygeg from the beginning until the end. All right, and finally, the final sugya in Hoitzah will be how machshava, right, the words of the Frierdiker Rebbe and Lekutei Dibura, machshava moyelos, here in this context, that my machshava has the power to give chashivus into the location upon which I'm making the hanacha. So even though normally, like one of the rules we had way early, I think it was in Daf Daled or in Daf Hey, that for a hanacha to be considered a hanacha, I have to put it down in a place that's at least 4 by 4. If not, that place is not chashiv. But if I intended specifically to put it in a certain spot, as we'll give examples, since this is exactly where I wanted to go, that machshava gives chashivus to that location, and the hanacha will be considered the hanacha. And on Daf Kuf Beis Amud Beis, we're going to start Perek HaBoina. This is already the 12th chapter. Yes, now we are leaving on the 12th chapter onwards the malacha of Hoitzah. We're going to begin with the malacha of Haboina. And when we learned the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Gimel, we spoke out as generally all malachas have a minimum amount required for you to be violating Shabbos in a way that you're going to be chayiv achatos, or God forbid, if it's done b'mezid, chayiv skila with the proper conditions. When it comes to Haboina, we're going to be learning whether there is a minimum share. And indeed, the Mishnah will use the words that by boina, even kol shehu, if it is an act of building, you will be chayiv for boina. But in that statement, we'll have in the Gemara a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. They argue in 3 cases, but it's all the same nekuda, that how little of kol shehu has to be there for you to be chayiv, mishum boina. The Gemara is going to give again 3 cases where your action is really very minute, and the question will be whether that's taka chayiv mishum boina, or whether you're going to be chayiv because of MERCAVA patish, but not because of boina. And as we already spoke a little bit about MERCAVA patish, that MERCAVA patish is not, it doesn't go together with every malacha. Every time you do something, you write 2 letters, you wrote, you're not going to be chayiv for writing and MERCAVA patish, right? You build something, you're not going to be chayiv for boina and MERCAVA patish. MERCAVA patish means whenever this action in itself is not connected to any of the malachas, but it's a finishing touch. It's something very little. Again, it doesn't meet the requirement of a malacha. So, for example, the 3 cases we're going to learn in Daf Kuf Beis Amud Beis will be according to one of these Amoraim, when a certain act is taka so little, it's not boina. Oh, if it's not boina, but if it is a finishing touch, then you will be chayiv because of Maka, the Patish, a lot more. Let's begin inside. Okay, so we left off Kuf Beis Amud Aleph, all the way on top of the Amid. We're starting with the Mishnah. We already mentioned on Daf Samach Zayin, right, that you bring a chatos only, clear, only if the action, the violation of Shabbos is done b'shoigeg. So says the Mishnah, again, we're learning still Hoitzah, and Dafka, the case will be Hazoireg, as we'll unpackage in the Gemara. What we're learning now is about throwing, not about carrying. Hazoireg. And let me give the example. It can be from a Rishus HaYachid to a Rishus HaRabim, but it can be 4 Amas in the Rishus HaRabim, okay? And if the act of Akira and Anacha were to happen, okay, you violated throwing. However, you, let's say, Shigigas Malacha, you forgot that you can't throw on Shabbos for 4 Amas. In that state of forgetfulness, you threw. But before the item landed, you remembered, oh, I can't throw something Dalad Amas b'Rishus HaRabim. So when it landed, then you knew that you did an act of Chilul Shabbos. You don't have Shogig from the beginning until the end. Now, Chevre, when we spoke out the intro and giving everyone a heads up, in the Maskan of the Gemara, this in itself will exempt you from Achatas, because you were not in a state of Shogig, both by the Akira and by the Hanocha. The Havamina of the Gemara, will be that the Mishnah is continuing telling you, number one, you were not in a state of Shogig when the Hanocha happened, and not only that, but Kolata Acher, another person caught it, another person catching it. Guys, this we learned on DAF. If I throw something and you don't have to leave your place, who did the Hanocha? Even though you caught it, the thrower did the Hanocha, because I aimed that it should go on you and it reached you. Kolata Acher means that I threw it ba'ofen, that when I threw it, you were not standing close enough to catch it. You, the catcher, you moved from your place after I threw the item, and you ran into the line of this item, and now you caught it. The pshat is you did the hanacha. Right? This already goes into a whole different topic of shnayim sha'asu. Right? I did the akira, you did the hanacha. And again, the havamina is, not only was there no shogig by the hanacha, but also kolata kelav, a dog caught it. And by the dog doesn't even have to leave its place. Point of a dog is that the mouth of the dog is not 4x4. It's not considered a hanacha in a makim that's chashiv, or shenisrifa, it was burnt. And again, we learned this in the beginning of the Masechta, that the mouth of the oven and the fire that's coming out doesn't have the minimum place of 4x4 tfachim. So it seems like the Mishnah is giving 2 reasons why you won't be chayiv chatas. Number 1, you were not in a state of shogig from the beginning until the end, and either you didn't do the hanacha, someone else did the hanacha, or it fell in a place that's not 4x4. So now says the Mishnah that you're potter. And the havamina is you need to have both. But now comes the Mishnah, and the Mishnah gives now a second case. In this second case, there isn't 2 heterim. There's only the 1 heter, that there isn't a shogig from the beginning until the end. And here we're moving on from the malacha of hoitzah to the malacha of chabura. Now, one may not wound his fellow on Shabbos. You may not wound yourself on Shabbos. There's a big machlokes rishonim. What is wounding a tolda of? We're going to leave that when we learn the sugya of wounding, but it for sure may not be done mid'oraisa. So Zajac lasis chabura. If I threw an object, but here we're not focusing on the issue of hitzah. Like for example, I threw it pachas midaladamas. So there's no malacha of hitzah, but I'm going to wound you. Bein ba'adam, bein b'behema. And indeed, the issur of making a wound is bein ba'adam, bein b'behema. However, again, for you to be chayiv chatas, you have to do the act b'shoigig. When you threw it, you were shoigig. You didn't know it's Shabbos. You didn't know you can't wound. But the nizkar acheloi nasas chabura. So now, says the Mishnah Potter, here clearly, you see that the only reason leptur is because you were not in a state of shoigig from the beginning until the end. And now the Mishnah gives a klal, and ze a klal. Kol chayavi chatois, einam chayavin, ad shetehei tchilason v'seifan shkaga. But if only tchilason shkaga v'seifan zadin, or the opposite, only by the beginning you were bezadin, even though at the end you were b'shgaga, then pturim ad shetehei tchilason v'seifan shkaga. And the challenge that we have when we learn the Mishnah is that the middle case of the Mishnah and the Zajac klal is giving a very straightforward klal. And in the first case of the Mishnah, it's mashma from the words that the only reason you're a pater, right, is because not you were b'shogeg by the hanacha, and also shnaim shasu, and also it was put down on a place that's less than 4 by 4. So which one is it? So asks the Gemara that when you learn the Reisha, it's mashma, right? Let's get the first case, kolata acher, that if you wouldn't have someone else running to catch it, then you would be chayiv. But why would that be? The Mishnah is speaking about a case that you remembered you may not throw, right? You were no longer a shogeg and a tanan. And this very Mishnah writes, Kol chayave chatois, einam chayavin, achetehei, chilasan, v'seifan, shkaga. So approach number 1 answers the Gemara, Amaraf kahanon, that's seifa, asoon, lelachta, umisna. This is very important. In other words, when the Mishnah concludes, right, the case of Chabura, there, excuse me, we're speaking about someone who threw an item. Now, lachta, misna, is when people used to transport barrels of wine on the back of a chamoir. There would be some sort of basket on either side, and the basket that had a wine on this side of the chamoir, the other basket that kept the other bottle of wine, were connected with a rope. The nakuda is that I threw something, that the basket is flying, but the rope is still in my hand. That's very significant because that means that I have the power to bring it back towards me. Okay, so when I throw an item that has a lachta and a misna, right, it's a basket and a rope. Over there, I'm sorry, Taka, if you were not in a state of shoigig by the akira and by the hanacha, that in itself will exempt you. Do you know why will it exempt you? Because if you became aware that it's Shabbos, right, and when you became aware, you had the power to retract it. So you're not retracting it, you're not bringing it back. That in itself is amazing. Oh, so since you were in a state of amazing where it, and you could have stopped the malacha from happening, then you're takapated. You have to be b'shoigig from the beginning until the end. But the Reisha of the Mishnah is speaking about you throwing something that you're not holding on to it with a rope in your hand, which means even after you become aware, there's nothing you can do. You can't retract it. This is the first approach. In such a case, even though when it had the hanacha, you were amazed, it's completely insignificant. Because after your acting of throwing, you're not doing anything. You're not doing anything active. You're not doing anything passive. There's nothing you could have done. So indeed, if not for the reason that kolata achar, if not for the reason that it fell into the mouth of a dog that's not 4 by 4, there you would still be chayiv, because when you made the akira, you were in a state of shoigig. Like the Gemara, that can be. The middle case of the Mishnah cannot be a scenario where there was a lachta una misna. Do you know why? We learned this concept many times together on a da'iraisa level. You're only chayiv for any type of hoitzah when the akira was a 100% akira. Remember that? The whole item has to leave this domain. None of that item is in your hand. If any of it is still in your hand, that in itself means you didn't do a 100% akira. B'chlal, you're not going to be chayiv. So lachto misna, the Mishnah cannot be referring to a case where some of it is still in your hand, because then you'll be exempt, independent of the din that we are introducing today, that it has to be tchilasan v'soifen b'shoigeg. So the Gemara says, you're right. Don't forget that the middle case is not speaking about hoitzah at all. We're not speaking about hoitzah. The safe is only speaking about a scenario where you want to wound someone. Okay? In other words, it's not about transferring. It's about a chabura. And here we say the same part, that I have to take a b'shoigig to be chayiv chatos. Since when I threw it, I was able to retract it. My choice of non-retracting it is part of the malacha. If I knew that it's asur, and yet I didn't retract it, that's already, I was amazed. I'm not going to be chayiv chatos. But again, if I throw something and I don't have any of it in my hand, so my knowledge cannot change the outcome, it's out of my control, there's no retraction, this is the first approach, then even though when, let's say, the hanocha happened, you were in a state of mazid, you will be chayiv chatos, because we don't care about that state because you couldn't retract it anymore. That can't be either. Because hanami tanina, as we learned, hazoyrek lasois chabura bein ba'adam bein ba'behema. No, don't tell me that the sefer, the last Zajac klal, is speaking about a chabura. That's the middle case of the Mishnah. In other words, if that is the case if that's the second case of the Mishnah, why is the Mishnah repeating Zajac klal? The Zajac klal has to include another case beyond the case of Chabura. Okay. So yes, it is. It's including another case. The middle case is Chabura, like we mentioned. By Chabura, if you throw it and you have the rope in your hand, that is where we say that when it hit the fellow, you were an amazed, you're going to be potter because you could have retracted it. What's the Zajac klal at the end of the Mishnah? Not about throwing, about carrying, which also makes a lot of sense, guys, because when I carry something and I'm walking, whether Reshus HaYachad or Reshus HaRabim, or I'm walking Dalad Amos b'Reshus HaRabim, in middle of remembering, today is Shabbos, I can stop before I did the transfer Reshus l'Reshus. It's b'koyach of me to stop. I'm walking, I'm not throwing it. At the end of the Mishnah is b'maviv. Okay, so holds Rav Kahana. According to Rav Kahana, my friends, if I threw something and in the middle of it flying in the air, I remember that this is asur. There was a mazid, there was awareness when it fell, I will still be chayav chatos because the only point we look at is the point of the akira because I can't retract it anyway. My idea then is irrelevant. Problem is, asks the Gemara, that's the problem. Since the Mishnah used the words hazoirek, and your moida that Zajac klal is going beyond the case of Chabura. So it's including a case of transferring. And the Mishnah used in the middle case, hazoirek. Now you got your problem. So it is mashma that even in a case of doing the malacha of hoitzah through zerika, where you cannot retract it, still the Mishnah is saying is that during the hanacha, you need to be in a state of shogeg. And if you are not in a state of shogeg, you won't be chayiv. And because of that, Rava changes and he challenges Rav Kahana, and he says, indeed, the reisha of the Mishnah is giving you two heterim. It's one or the other. This is referring to the first case of the Mishnah. That in itself is a heter already. Why is it a heter? Because now that you know, when the hanacha happens, even though you can't retract it, you are not on a shoygig, so that's it. It wasn't shoygig mitchilas avat soifay. Or you threw it, you did not remember that it's asur, but there's another reason, there's another heter. Well, that is either kolata acher, right? So it's shnaim shasu, or it's kolata kelav oishenisrafa, meaning it fell on a muckin that's not daled by daled. In such a case, you're going to be potter. And I know that we're just starting, it's getting late, but just to repeat this in the kudah that we spoke at in the intro, according to Rava's approach, indeed, when I throw something, if I remember in middle that it's Shabbos and it falls, I'm going to be potter, is the charaya that my state of awareness during the hanacha is of significance. This does not contradict the Nemuka Yosef's word in Bava Kama, that how can a woman light Shabbos candles? Isha mishum chitzai. If I throw an arrow and I hurt you, I'm chayiv. If I light a fire and the fire burns you 10 minutes later, I'm chayiv, right? Because it's my koyach. So how can you light a fire out of Shabbos? It's burning into Shabbos. You can't burn on Shabbos. So to which he answers, yeah, of course you're chayiv. But you're chayiv for the act that you did when you lit it. You know, the Nemuka Yosef says, once you hear it, it resonates. Yes, it's all my koyach, but when did I do that koyach? Let's go now to throwing. I did that koyach when I did the akira. Doesn't that imply that we only care about your involvement during the akira? And the answer is, my koyach is viewed as what state I was in during the akira. But to define hanacha, the definition of a hanacha, when it comes to chiyuv chatos, hanacha means a hanacha that's done when the owner, when the person who did it is in a state of shoygig. If I'm not then in a state of shoygig, it's not defined as a hanacha. Now, if it will be defined as a hanacha, what time did I do the malacha? When I did the akira. It's going to go back to the time of the akira. So I light a fire before Shabbos. I won't be chayiv by the fact that the fire is burning in Shabbos because my koyach went in out of Shabbos. But we're not looking at the time of, we're looking at the definition of. And the definition of a malacha is shogeg mitchilasoi ba'atsoifoi. So that's the machlokes between Rav Kahana and Rabbi. And Avashi Yamar, he's going to side with Rabbi. Elama, the way he's going to teach the first case of the Mishnah is he's adding another nuance. If you threw something, and you remember that you did something wrong after the item left your hands, but before it landed, not or, he's learning an afkahana. And on top of that, kulata achar, another person catches the item, or kulata kelavash isrifa, you are pater, and indeed make the inference that infers that if it would have landed, not another person would have chopped it, not a dog would have had it in his mouth if it landed. You will be chayiv. You will be chayiv. When will you be chayiv, even though you were aware in the middle? That's if after you remembered, before the hanacha, you went again into a state of shoygig. Shechazar v'shachach. Shoygig, while it's flying, uyet Shabbos, then you forgot again, and it landed b'shoygig. Aval loy chazar v'shachach. And when it landed, you were still in a state of awareness, then you're going to be pater. And as the Mishnah says at the end, shekol chayav echatois einam chayavin ad shetei tchilas v'seifim b'shgaga. And as we spoke out, this is called a yediyah lachatzi shiur. And chayz, this is the chiddush here. This is a machloikes Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel and the Chachamim, whether yesh yediyah lachatzi shiur or not. If I'm writing a letter, the shoygig, then I remember today is Shabbos. Then I forget and I write the second letter. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says I'm chayiv because ein yediyah lachatzi shiur. My awareness did not interrupt. The Chachamim say my awareness does interrupt, but their machlekes is only by writing because it was bikoichi not to write the second letter. Here, when I throw something, since the moment it left my hand, I cannot retract it. It's gonna land. So lakula alma, my awareness does not separate the beginning and the end. And since my awareness does not separate the beginning and the end, if during the hanacha again I was a shoygig, so there was tchilase b'shoygig, v'soife b'shoygig l'kula alma. That's the Rav Ashi's pshat in the reish of the Mishnah, which is why the reish of the Mishnah has to give you another heter, because just your awareness in between in itself won't negate the chatos. But if you remember and you continuously remember, and when it landed you were in a state of amazed, then indeed that in itself will take away your chiyuv of chatos. And indeed, as the Mishnah writes at the bottom, like the Gemara is referring back to the Mishnah, that Zajac klal, right, kol chayav chatois, right, edem chayavim ashetehei, right, chilasan v'soifan v'shoygig. So says the Gemara itma. Now listen to this case. Now we're going away from throwing and we're going to walking. Perhaps. Look at this. Listen to this case. Machlekes. What are we referring to? Itma. Shtei amas. An item was transferred, again, we'll see soon, carrying or throwing, 2 amas. Let's speak about 2 amas in the Reshus HaRabim. And during the first 2 amas, the one who's doing the hitzah is in a state of shoygig. Then the next 2 amas, which closes the malacha, was done b'mezid. The person didn't stop yet. And shtei amas was done b'shoygig. Shoygig, mezid, shoygig. And so says the Gemara machlokes, where it sounds like a machlokes. Rabbi says you're pater. Rabbi says you're chayiv. Now the Gemara is going to explain that they are b'chlal not arguing. Each one is referring to a different scenario. Rabbi says you're pater. Why? Because the Amar ein yediyah lachatzi shiur. He doesn't side with the Rashbag. I'm sorry, he sides with the Rashbag. Since the yediyah doesn't bring about a chiyuv chatos when you are in middle, you walk 2 amas. Now you know it's Shabbos. Are you chayiv chatos? No, because you didn't do amalacha yet. So your yediyah is not significant. Okay. And hasam hu dichi kagamar shiura b'shoygig kagamar. And in the case of, let's say, writing 2 letters, since ein yediyah lachatzi shiur, you wrote the second letter, again, you were in a state of a shoygig. So you wrote the first letter b'shoygig, the second letter b'shoygig. You got to act of shoygig, 2 letters, you chayiv chatos. But over here, the b'mezid, all right. But here, when you hit the 4 amas, when you hit the minimum, the required measure to violate Shabbos, you were in a state of mezid. And since you were in a state of mezid, when you hit the 4 amma mark, Rabbi says you're pater. When you completed the shiur, you were deliberate. Now the Gemara says,
Rabbi, potter meaning what?
And the Gemara says, Ubemai, 1 second, and what type of act of Eitzah is Rabbi referring to? Says the Gemara, can be that it's referring to Bezoidek. Because if it was Bezoidek, how can you say that when he hit the 4 amma mark, he was in a state of deliberateness? If it's flying and you cannot retract it, then what counts is the Akira and the Hanacha. The in-between is not even in your koyach, right? And therefore, since when it landed, you were b'shoigig, and that is when the malacha happened, then you should be shoigig. And therefore, you should be chayiv chatas. Rabbi would never say potter. It's very important. And like Tosfos here, Tosfos Divrei Maschil Ubamai says that afal gav the chigama shiur b'meisv. Hold on, but still, even if it's flying, the mark of 4 amas is of significance. So he says no. That since you cannot retract it, whenever I do an action and there's nothing I can do in the middle to stop it, we have to view the entire action as one ma'aseh. Mitchilosei va'atsoifei, says Tosfos. B'kamokim kivan b'tchila zrika have a shoygig ve'ein yochoy lahachzira, and during the hanacha nami shoygig chashiv ki ilu mitchila va'atsoif. It's considered one single act. The only way that you can say that it's not one single act is only if you are carrying it, and therefore you were able to stop at any given time. So when Rabbi says that you are potter, it must be, right, that the Rabbi's case was b'ma'avir. It's only in a case where you were walking it, and you were able to stop. And when you walked the other 2 amas, when you were able to stop, you were doing it b'mezid. So therefore, Rabbi is going to hold that l'kula alma, since at that moment, it's not like you had awareness in between the 2 letters. Here you had awareness while you hit the 4 amma mark. Rabbi says you're potter. But then I'll get to you in a moment. Rabbi, who says chayiv, says the Gemara, Rabbi is not arguing with Rabbi. First of all, Rabbi says you're chayiv, and that is true not only according to the Rashbag, but even according to the Chachamim that say that when you write 2 letters, you wrote 1 letter b'shoigig, then you remembered the Shabbos, or you remembered you can't write on Shabbos. Then you forgot again, and you wrote the 2nd letter. The Chachamim hold yesh yidiyah lachatzi shiur, since yidiyah normally ends that malacha, right? You do a malacha, you chayv chatos when you had yidiyah, even though this yidiyah doesn't bring about the chiyuv chatos, but it is of significance. So it's machalik between the beginning and the end. Imagine, and therefore you won't be chayv chatos. That's only in the case of writing Hassan hu de biyadai. The biyadai is Rashi. Look inside Rashi, 6 lines before the bottom of the Amid. The biyadai shloi lachzer v'lichtev hashniya. When you remembered at Shabbos, you could have stopped. So that awareness, really, if you would have stayed in this, if you would have remained knowing that at Shabbos, Yitaka wouldn't have done it. It was at the moment of awareness, that awareness could have resulted in a different outcome. Now that you know it's Shabbos, you're not going to write the other letter. Now, the fact that you forgot again, that's another shoygig. So it's another shoygig, it's another action. So the Chachamim say it doesn't combine. Yesh yidiyah l'chatzi shiur. But over here, back in the Gemara, Avol Hachem, since the ein biyadai, in the case where you can't stop it, that means obviously Rabbi is not speaking about Mavet. Rabbi is speaking about Zajac. So then will be that what? That your yediyah is not machalik. And if your yediyah is not machalik, when that kid happened, you were in a state of shaygig. When it landed, you were then in a state of shaygig. As we explained, that your state of shaygig defines the hanacha. It was a hanacha b'shaygig, and therefore you're chayiv. And therefore, Kum Tochai says the Gemara that if that's the logic of Rava, Rava is not speaking about someone who's walking the 6 amas. Because if you're walking and in middle you have a mazid, then again it's biyadai. Even ma'avar biyadai. So it must be that Rava's statement that chayiv is b'zoyrek. So really, Rabbi and Rabbi B'chlal don't disagree. They agree. Rabbi says pater in the case of Mavid. Rabbi says you're chayiv in the case of zoyrek. Yes, Danny.
So the case of walking right now we're saying is analogous to the case of writing, right? Because you're in control.
Yes.
Whereas throwing, because once it left your hand, you're not in control anymore. So therefore, you just look at the beginning and the end. And if both were in a state of of inadvertence,
then everyone will hold that ein yediyah l'chatzi shiur. Everyone will hold to that. Gavaldik. This is deep.
Ein yediyah l'chatzi shiur means that that they do combine or they don't combine.
Ein yediyah means that your yediyah is insignificant, and since your yediyah is insignificant, they do combine.
And you'd be chai v'chatos.
And you chai v'chatos. Amazing. The Chachamim say yesh yediyah l'chatzi shiur means that just normally if I do the same malach again and again and again. So how did we begin to Zajac, right? If it's gas malacha, I forgot that I can't build, and I'm building. I'm chayv one chatos. But the moment I had yediyah, since that yediyah is machayev mi achatos, so all of the acts of building before the yediyah is one group. If I forget again and I build again, I'm chayv another chatos. That everyone agrees to. But that's because the yediyah brings about a chiyuv chatos. If I'm writing one letter, b'shoigig, and then I realized, I can't write, I'm not chayv chatos because I didn't do a whole malacha. So that's why Rav Shimon Gamliel holds, since the yediyah is not machayev you a chatos, it's irrelevant. As long as you finish the other letter, b'shoigig, it combines. The Chachamim say, yesh yediyah l'chatzi shiur. Even though the yediyah after one letter is not machayev you a chatos, doesn't matter. It's separated, like Rashi says the words, it's a new shoigig. I wrote one letter, that's one act b'shoigig. I did another action b'shoigig. Each one only had a chatzi shiur. You're not chai for either of them. And here we're adding this nuance that when do you have this debate? When it's biyadai. By zrika, that's the beauty of the whole Gemara here. Since it's not in my hand to retract it, so my knowledge could not have stopped it anyways. When you're writing and now you know it's Shabbos, you should, if you wouldn't forget again, your taka wouldn't write. Here your knowledge is irrelevant. Not only halachically irrelevant, it's factually irrelevant. I can't bring it back. And yes, we're going with the rule, not like Rav Kahana. You need to have shoigig in the beginning and at the end. There was a shoigig in the beginning and at the end. So l'kula alma, your yediyah, your knowledge in between, will not be mechalek, and therefore you'll be chayiv chatos.
But by the way, if he didn't if he didn't forget again, I mean, if he just threw it, not knowing, and then he remembered, I'm not allowed to throw, and then it landed in a state of him knowing that he was not allowed to, then he would be potter according to everybody.
That's the machlokes between Rav Kahana and Rava. It's Rav Kahana. In the beginning, he learned the Mishnah that you won't be potter. But we don't go by that. But the Gemara, the Rava in here, and Avashi, we're saying no, that's incorrect. Just that in itself exempts you from achatos. Now it says the Gemara right. Amar Rava, Zajac v'nacha b'fi kalaf b'fi kipsham, right? And that was the second part of the Reish of our Mishnah. And the way we explained it, we learned this on Daf Dalad, Daf Hey, is that it didn't fall the Makim Dalad al Dalad. So it's not a proper Hanacha. So the Mishnah said you're exempt, right? This or that. Says an Amayra, no, you're chayiv. Thinking about how can you go against the Mishnah, befedish against the Mishnah. You're potted. Now, kolata acher is because of shnaim shasu, but because a person's hand is like dalad al dalad. But we don't say that in the mouth of a dog. We don't say that if it falls in a fire that's coming out of a oven that doesn't have dalad by dalad. So here Rava says the following. In our Mishnah, the loy mechaven. The loy mechaven means that you didn't care where it will fall. You wanted to fear throwing it. Indeed, since it fell in a place that's not dalad bal dalad, it's not called a proper hanacha. But the Rava is speaking about a person who wanted it to fall in the mouth of a dog, wanted it to fall in the fires of this oven. He intended it to fall over there. So aside of the sugi that we learned above, that once you intend the place, it cannot go beyond, it cannot go before. Another than your intent gives chashivus to that place. Since to come a chavin, so now it has chashivus. I don't care if it's not 4x4. And indeed, we're quoting a Mishnah in Krisis that will substantiate this difference. Will back up Rava. Your machshava, your intent gives chashivus to the makayim. It says in the Mishnah, guys, remember this? It was in the bottom of the Yomid. We didn't learn this that long ago. That yesh oichal achila achas, it's shaykh that a person should eat. We're speaking about machalas asuras, something that you may not eat. An act of eating is called a kazayis. You ate one kazayis, but you're going to be chayav for that one act, 4 chatois and 1 asham. And what was that case? So it was Hatame Halkop Sha'achal Chelev, that is Noisar from Mugdashim, and he ate it on Yom Kippur. Now hold on. Tame eating kachim, it's kares. Anyone eating chelev, forget about kachim. Eating chelev is kares. Eating noiser, kares chayv chatas. Eating on Yom Kippur, my friends. Stop eating on Yom Kippur. Chayv kares. So it's 4. On top of that, you have to bring in Ashama Elois. Even if the kohen is the one that ate it, a kohen can only eat that which God gave to the kohen. Chelev belongs on the altar. Means even a kohen who eats chelev, he's being moil. He's eating from what does not belong to him. Ashami. These are the 4 and the 1. And now that comes along, Rav Meir, and he says, ooh, I'll give you a case where you'll be chayiv not 4 chatos, a 5th chatos. Af im hoisa Shabbos v'tziyah b'fiv, you're going to be chayiv. You put it in your mouth and you walked out of your Reshus HaRachet while you're chewing the food, you're chayiv chatos. So the Chachamim said, we agree with you, Rav Meir, but we're not going to count it in the Mishnah because you're confusing 2 different Yisurim together. Amrullah eino min Hashem. Are we focusing on a sin of eating, or are we focusing on a sin of carrying? Don't confuse them together. You know, if the person while they're walking, they kick your animal and they're mazik, they'll be chayv another money. We're speaking about a issur of eating. You would have made, you're giving me a case where a person is eating, but the violation is not machalas asuris. It's that he ate while he walked, while he carried. That's another law. We're not counting it. Now, the point is, says the Gemara of Amai, hold on, I get it. Chachamim by the way, they agree you're chayiv chatas. They're just not counting it as the group. Why does everyone agree that you're chayiv chatas? A person's mouth is not 4 by 4 tfachim. And if it's not derech tzabakach, it's not 4 by 4, it's not the normal way of carrying. So why b'chlal will you be chayiv chatas? And the answer must be Ella, given the kamachavein. You intend to carry something in your mouth. For you, it's important. We don't say ein darkoi in this case. And the same thing will be with dalad al dalet. Because machshavtoi mashyolei makim. Machshavtoi mashyolei makim. So hachinami, given the kamachavin, machshavtoi mashyolei makim. And on this we say, Hadan and Allah, we'll come back to you, Perek HaZoyrek. I just want to finish this Perek on a Chassidish note, with a Hasidic insight, which will link us to the next Perek, that our purpose is to bring the Shechina down onto the Smakim. That's what we emphasize. Of course, some of Yiddishkeit is also us going up. We have to work on ourselves getting closer to Hashem, so to say, but the Iker Kavana is not about me getting closer, but it's about me bringing God into this lowly place. And people can argue, what's the big deal of bringing the Shechina down? What are you bringing the Shechina down into such a lowly world? It has no chashivus. No, my machshava is machshav the place, my holy machshava. Now, based on this concept that my intent of bringing the Shechina down over here, that in itself gives chashivus to the makom. You guys turn to the Kuf Beis Amid Beis. That begins the whole Perek HaBoina. And as Tosfos, before we learn the Mishnah, let's get ahead of ourselves. Look inside. Tosfos doesn't understand. Tosfos. Tzarech litin tam amay tani boina achar zrika. Ooh, the Seder doesn't make sense. I get it that as Tosfos says on Daf Beis, as Tosfos says earlier on after the Mishnah and the Ayin Gimel, that Hoitzah is Malacha Gerua because it doesn't change the item itself. You speak about Hoitzah. But then why go back to the Seder of the Mishnah? Go back to Zoreya. Like, what's the Haboina? Tosfos says he doesn't know. So Al Pi Chasidus, the whole purpose that for what we are here is to build a home for God over here. Dira b'tachtonim. And Dira b'tachtonim is done by Hoitzah. You know, so to say, we're bringing godliness that's revealed above and initially concealed below, and we're bringing it, we're being megala it here, lamata, building a home for God. Okay, anyways, Haboina. So what's the shiur of Haboina? So says the Mishnah, the words, Kama Yidna V'chayiv, says the Mishnah, Haboina Kol Shuhu, any amount. Now we're going to get into the Gemara. What does any amount mean? Even when the Mishnah says Kol Shuhu, could be there's such a small amount that's not even called any amount. And the Hamisates, one who chisels a stone. Chiseling a stone is either you're making it smooth for you to properly put it into a building. Chiseling a stone can mean you are putting a decorative symbol in the stone. Vahamaka bepatish, and if Pashit, you physically strike, right, a blow with a hammer, or with a hammer, or with a matzah, another type of instrument. And here we're speaking about a person who's taking a stone out of the rock. It's called, you're quarrying. So the final blow is what? That's not clear. Is that haboina? Because since the stone will be used in the building, so when you do the final act of removing it from the wall, you're preparing the stone for building, that's building? Or is this actually MERCAVA patush? We'll see that in the Gemara. Another example of haboina will be hakoideach, you're drilling. Again, it's a chiddush because when you're drilling, it's very little. That's called boina, kolshu, you're chayiv. And Zajac says the Mishnah, kol ha'isa melacha. Umelachtoi miskayemes b'Shabbos, you're going to be chayiv. Now, my friends, look inside the Rashi. Rashi, 17 lines from the top of the Amid. This is huge. Says Rashi b'Shabbos, ha'isa melacha koi. The word b'Shabbos don't read the Mishnah that if you did a malacha and your malacha is miskayim on Shabbos, you're chayiv. No. He's saying that if you do a malacha on Shabbos and it will be miskayim, you're going to be chayiv. The word Shabbos doesn't go on the kiyum, it goes on when you are doing it. The Rambam argues with Rashi. The Rambam writes that the definition of, for you to be chayiv Shabbos, you have to do a malacha shemiskayim. Miskayim for how long? You know for how long? For Shabbos. If you do an act that stands for 24 hours, that's called miskayim. If it's not going to last for the Shabbos, it's called eina miskayim. Rashi does not learn that shot in the Mishnah. According to Rashi, miskayim might have to be much more than Shabbos. Just something lasting for 24 hours can still be defined. L'shitas Rashi as eina miskayim. The Shabbos means, that's what Rashi is emphasizing, that if you do it on Shabbos and it's miskayim, you're going to be chayiv. Right? If you're taking a hammer, the ironsmith, and you're knocking it on an anvil. The anvil is this flat metal. Normally, you put a keli on the anvil and you bang it on the anvil. Even if you take a hammer and you only bang the anvil, you're not banging on a keli. You're also going to be, but you're doing it b'shas malacha, you're going to be chayiv. It's like you are improving the work. Let's leave this for the Gemara to explain more about Shitas Rashbag. Okay, so now the Gemara begins to focus on the rule of the Mishnah. Yes, generally there is a minimum shiur that you have to do for you to be chayiv chatos, but by building, the Mishnah says, kol shehu. Problem is, everything comes back from the Mishkan. So first of all, how is it chashiv? Number one is lamai chazia, and number two will be is, where do you find this in the Mishkan? Yeah, a poor person will dig a little hole. Nebuch, he has a few copper coins. They were not only made out of a metal that's less valuable, but they were physically smaller. And you want to bury it, so you're going to dig a little hole. So it is of significance. And where do we find it in the Mishkan? The Mishkan. People that were sewing up the curtains, they were chayfrin guma. Sometimes they would have to dig a hole over there in the sand in the desert, to hide their needles, because their chaver is going to borrow the needle and not return it. They want to hide their needles. They want to store their needles. So Rabbi says, no, that's not the source in the Mishkan. They would not have done that, because even the mishtaki, since these needles, if you put them in the ground, they will rust. They would not dig a hole for such a little, to hide a needle in there. Ella, where do we find this? Shekain, ani, oisa, pitpute, kira, katana, that a pauper who never has a very small amount of food, and it has small ovens, and the ovens have small tripods, that he will build a little contraction, lishpois oleo, kadera katana, to set upon it a small pot. And we're using this mashal not because we're negating you digging a hole to hide your prutas, because this act of setting up a small little pot was taka done in the Mishkan. The Kavasagabe Mishkan, when you were mavashli samanim, Litzboya yiriyos shechasre malach. In other words, they needed to dye the yiriyos, and they prepared for it. They steeped their herbs. What happens if they underestimated how much they needed? You're painting your house today, and you don't need a pint. You need a little bit more. So then they would cook a little bit more herbs. Sometimes they would cook a very small amount. And when you would cook, they would have to build, they're in the midbar, they would have to build the base for an oven. To which Rav Yaakov tells Abai, I completely disagree with you. Because even when in the Mishkan, they only needed a small amount of new colorings, new dyes, because of the rule, Ein Aniyas L'Makam Ashiris, there was a certain harchava in the Mishkan. Whenever they made something, they made a lot of it. They would never set up such a small tripod to cook such a small amount of herbs. Ella, again, we're looking for a malacha that's binyan little. Shekem balabayis, sheyeshlei nekev bibirasei soismai. If you have a little hole, even a little hole, you will, no bothers of balabata sheyid, any minor imperfection will bother you. You're gonna stop it up. The kapasagabe mishkan, shekein keresh enough lo by darno. Now, guys, we learned not that long ago on Daf Tzadik Ches, right? We learned on Daf Tzadik Ches from Tamim Yal Roishoi that whether Tamim means that it tapered off, but one thing is for sure that the Karashim needed to be from one solid chunk, not plywood, right, knocked together. True, but if in the solid Kedesh there was a little worm that made a little lechele, they would stop it up. They would make it perfect. They did not tolerate imperfections. Matif l'toicha avar, they would pour some lead inside of it, and v'soismai. In other words, and that's part of binyan. So even a little, whether it is to stop up a hole or to make a hole, that's something that we find in the Mishkan. Just to speak out what the Achreinim talk about, that from Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, we have an inyan that when you build a home, when you are refurbishing a house, and you want to close up an area of a door, or you want to close up a window way, don't fully stop it up, because the shadim, they use that to come and to go. And if you completely stop that, if you close up that area, they'll be angry at you and they can be mazik you. Remember that concept? And that's Lamaisa. When you stop up such an area, the solution is to make a little hole. So the Achrayim speak about binyan, they were speaking about making little holes or stopping up little holes. If you're stopping up a little hole because someone Friday, they closed up your doorway and you're sitting Shabbos eating shom saying, the shadim are going to get me, and you're going to want to make a little lechala, that's called the malacha she'ein tzricha legufa. I'm not saying you're allowed to do it. It's malacha she'ein tzricha legufa because it's not part of binyan. You don't want the hole. You just don't want the shadim to hurt you. Okay, and we paskin like Rab Shimon, you're not going to be chayiv chatas for that. Let's go right. Omar Shmuel, hamitzadeid eso even. If you're building a building and all you're doing is you are positioning a stone in the ground, you're not cementing it in the ground, you're not making a hole in the ground and putting it in as a foundation, you're just making it stand or sit firm on the ground. Again, it's like a binyan kosher. You didn't connect it, you didn't dig holes. You says Shmuel, you're going to be chayiv. I, frek the Gemara on Shmuel, Meisvei, it says in a Braisa, Echad anoisen ha'even, ve'echad noisen es hatit. When you're making a wall, a stone wall, so you would put stones, you would put cement. So the question is, who violated Baina? So it says in the Braisa that the guy that put the cement is chayiv, hanoisen es hatit chayiv. Now, by the way, if first the cement was put and then the stone was put, then the guy that put the stone is chayiv. Point is that the Braisa is saying that a stone without cement is not miskayim. That fits a lot better with Rashi's miskayim, and you're not going to be chayiv chatos. So how can Shmuel say that even without cement, you're just mitzadeh, you're going to be chayiv? So the Gemara answers by saying, I have another question. It says in that same Braisa, that if a person only lifted a stone and placed it on the top row with no cement, you just place the stone on the top, you're going to be chayiv. Hold on. Here, it's even less than Shmuel. Ali says you have to position it in the ground. You have to fix it in the ground. Okay, you're not digging a hole, but you're making sure that it's solid. Here, the end of the Braisa, Rabbi Yossi is saying, if you just put a stone, you're chayiv. So which one is it? Is it do you have to at least place it firmly? Do you have to put cement? Or just placing it is enough for you to be chayiv? L&D, the Gemara says, there's three types of buildings. Pichasidis, how great is this? Tata, Mitzia, Ve'ela. Tata, right, the row in the bottom, only bayit seduda va'afra. It needs positioning. Va'afra doesn't mean you're making a hole in the ground. Positioning it means you have to make sure that the earth underneath it is flat. So you're fixing it good into the ground. If you did less than that, then you didn't do binyan. But that is enough. The middle row needs the middle row needs cement. Eloi, the ones who are putting the uppermost row, bahanacha ba'alma, gewaldik. And my friends, that's our generation. We are at the end of Golus, right? We're laying the final row of bricks in the base of Mikdash. And that's to our advantage, that even if we're not the greatest brick layers, in other words, we're not putting cement, we're not that solid, any action, like the Rambam says, ein machshava, you did it, bahanacha ba'alma, you did an act of binyan, and that's going to bring the redemption. Now, bahamasates, if you chisel a stone, like we spoke out in the Mishnah, it's not clear. Chiseling a stone, again, it's kosher, but it's so indirect. You're not even putting it in the building yet, right? You're finishing the stone that it should be worthy to go into the building. So, here's the machlokes. Rav, throughout the sugya, will hold that mamisha kol shehu is shaykh to binyan. Shmuel doesn't agree with that. Shmuel needs for your action to be a little bit more significant, for it to be even called kol shehu, and if it's less than that, then you won't be chayiv because of boina. You'll be chayiv because of MERCAVA patish. Shmuel said MERCAVA patish. That's machlokes number one. Machlokes number two. You have a chicken scoop. Now, normally buildings have doors and windows for people to go in and go out. Here, if a chicken coop has no windows and it's closed, the stench is so strong that it's going to suffocate the chickens. The chickens won't be able to tolerate it. So you make a little hole for the shmekachs to go out. Shouldn't be that stuffy. So Raf says that little hole is boina. Shmuel says it's not called boina, MERCAVA patish. And case number three, ayel shufta bikoifina demara. If you have a agricultural tool known as a hoe, basically it's a shovel. So you have the metal part of the shovel, you have the wooden handle, and then there is a peg that you will insert to make the metal connected to the handle, just putting that peg in, just wedging that peg in. Rav says, Baina, Shmuel says, MERCAVA patish. I know it's getting late, just to bring up the big issue, that Rashi Shita is mamish ein binyan bekalim. How will Rashi learn over here? That's a big issue. Okay, but according to the other Rishonim, they don't say ein binyan bekalim ever. This is binyan bekalim because without the peg, you have no hoe. Okay, so now the question is, there's a common theme. What you're doing is very kosher. Is it taka still binyan or not? And if it's not binyan, you chayiv MERCAVA patish. But why did they have to argue in all three cases? As the Gemara v'tzricha, because the iyashmein and kamaisa, I would argue kamaisa is where you're chiseling a stone, right? I would say only if there does Rav say that you chayiv mishum binyan mishum devarach binyan lekach. You have to chisel. You have to chisel the stones. Avalois and nekam loshul tanagoyim the ein derech binyan bekach. The ein derech binyan bekach. Because when you build a house and you make taka holes and windows, forget about the shadim that I mentioned. You don't make a little hole. When you make a window, you make a window. It's only in a lushal tanagoyim that people make these little holes, but that's not the normal way. So maybe you would have thought, Ema, right, that Rav will be moidet to Shmuel, it can't be called binyan. It's not binyan. So he has to say, no, it's binyan. The Iyashmin and even Baha, I would say Baha ka'amarav, mishum dudami binyan da avda davira. At least, even though you're making a little hole, but you're doing it for the same reason why you make a normal window. You want the air to go in and out. So it's being done for the same purpose. Avul shufta bikoifina demara. But when you put a peg, which is going to connect the metal part of the tool to the handle part of the tool, the ein derech binyan bekach. Such a little activity of putting a peg. So you would think, even, at least over here, Ema moidel Shmuel, Rav will hold that it's not binyan. So therefore, Rav has to let us know that in all of these cases, it's boina. The Mishnah says boina, haboina kolshu. It means kolshu. And the same thing in the reverse, the Yashmin and Baha, we only had the dispute in the last case, right, where you're doing the least act of binyan. Then you would think only over here, the Shmuel hold that it's only MERCAVA patish. But in the first two, we're going to a greater act. Maybe he'll be moided tanav. So therefore, they needed to argue in all three cases. And just to speak out again, we spoke this out a few daf ago, right? When the Gemara begins, Mishumai Machayev, this is a big machlokes, because according to many Rishonim, if I'm giving you hasra'ah, in order for my hasra'ah to be valid, I can't just tell you you're being mechalel Shabbos. I have to tell you what malacha you're violating. Boina, MERCAVA patish are two different malachas, and therefore, indeed, this is very relevant. Let's another line. From Rabbi Yochanan, regarding our case, if you are chiseling a stone, now we know now Machlekes Rav and Shmuel, but they asked Rabbi Yochanan, is it boina or is it MERCAVA patish? He responded by making, he knocked his hand in his palm, which means MERCAVA patish. It says in our Mishnah, Hamasates MERCAVA patish. It's mashma no, that Masates is boina. So Rabbi Yochanan says, no, take out the vav. Ema Hamasates, and that is MERCAVA patish. And Tashema, again, L'chayra, Akasha, against the shita from our Mishnah, just one more line, doing that Kuv Gimel, HaKoideya Kol Shu Chayiv, if you drill even the smallest hole, you Chayiv. Now, Chayiv, our Mishnah is boina. So Bishleim L'Rav, yeah. You're making a minimum hole. You're only drilling a hole to put a nail. It's boina. Mechze kaman to char chayr to lebinyana. Yeah. However, it goes together. In other words, when you're drilling a hole in a chicken coop, you're chayav boina. Like the Mishnah says, it's like mikadeach. El l'shmuel. Shmuel holds when you're making a hole in a chicken coop, you're only chayav because of MERCAVA patish. There is no boina. How does he learn our Mishnah? Here you're also making a little hole. Ein derech binyan bekach, such a little hole. El l'shmuel lav gemar melacha. Okay, so Shmuel. So you would say anachanami when the Mishnah says mekadeach, the Mishnah means MERCAVA patish. That can be because by the chicken coop, you know what your final finishing touch is? Making a hole in the chicken coop, and then the ear goes in and out. When the Mishnah is speaking about someone drilling a hole, they're drilling a hole in order for you afterwards to put in a nail. So if the hole is not boina, so you're going to say l'shmuel, it means MERCAVA patish. It's not MERCAVA patish because after you drill the hole, you still have to put something in the hole. So it's not even the final finishing touch. So it must be, answers the Gemara, that when the Mishnah says that you're chayiv for mikadeach, it's MERCAVA patish. It's not boina. It's very little. You have to do something afterwards. No, you drill the hole already with the iron in it. The bazei beramtza the parzalo. In other words, you are. How are you doing mekadeach? How do you make a hole in the wall? So today you have this imaginary machine, right? To drill. They didn't have drills then. They would use a metal tool. Sometimes the person's kavanah was to leave that tool in the wall. So after they made a hole in the wall, they left that metal in there. So this is taka the final finishing touch for shafka bigavei, and therefore indeed the Mishnah taka doesn't mean boina. The Mishnah says mikadeach means MERCAVA patish.
Like drilling a screw. If you drill a screw into the wall.
And you're leaving the screw in. Because then, taka the hainu, gemar malacha, my friends, to be continued.
Rabbi, right. Quick question.
I just want to say that tomorrow morning, we're going to learn, God willing, in Aden, because we're going to get the thing in today. The only thing is for the chevra that want to learn dafka over there, that Sunday morning, at least in the beginning, when it's 2 hours, I don't want to sit in there for 2 hours with many people. Sunday morning, we'll continue on Zoom. That will be the Seder now. And Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, in Mitzvah Hashem, we'll be learning, and we won't be learning in the back. It's very noisy. It was hard for me, but we're going to be learning inside the front room. Now, I'm asking people that go there to wear a mask. You're going to sit very far away from me. And Hashem. Yeah, what's your question?
The chiseling, Machlekes Rav and Shmuel, right?
Yes.
The chiseling, you chisel a stone. Can we say that if you, let's say you chiseled half the stone, but you didn't finish chiseling, but you did definitely a mice of chiseling, would Rav say you're chayiv and Shmuel say you're putter?
Exactly. That's exactly what they say. Because if the chiv was only because of MERCAVA patish, then what you needed to do needed to be the end, the finishing touch.
Okay, so that's a big nafkamina.
That's a big, I should have said that. A big, much bigger than the hasra. Correct. All right. Chevra, I get